The 7th generation of consoles is a weird time in gaming to go back and visit. It's a generation I definitely have nostalgia for, and it has its fair share of solid titles, don't get me wrong. But it's also a time with some of the worst gameplay trends throughout the entire history of gaming, such as a hyper-focus on cinematic moments and QTEs. A time where genres like horror and shooters were arguably at their worst. Like, for every Dead Space or Bioshock, there were 2 or 3 games in their genres that just sucked. I mean, with horror alone, we got 2 of the worst Resident Evil games in the entire franchise, and don't even get me started on Silent Hill Homecoming and Downpour, those insufferable flakes of ass crust. The shooter landscape at this time was dominated by your Call of Duties and your Battlefields, and games that tried to follow in their path. And though those games had good multiplayers, and from that perspective, it really wasn't the worst thing, from a single-player perspective, these games kind of sucked, because they were just messes of bad gameplay pacing while you spend a shit ton of time watching characters talk in unskippable cutscenes, playing red light, green light with the combat. Some people call this style of shooter Spunk Gargle Wee Wee. I just call it an unofficial rail shooter, because that's what these games are. Roller coaster rides more than interactive experiences, taking you through the controlled highs and lows of the action. Which, I mean, at the best of times is a fun spectacle to watch, but to that end, I could just watch a Fast and Furious movie. Same visual spectacle, but at least I'm not, having my time wasted with the pretense of gameplay. Plus, I'll be learning some family values. Not really, though, because, ew, children, ugh. A big part of gaming is, the gameplay. You kind of undermine that when most of the game is either cinematic set pieces or walking segments. I know, who would have thought, but hey, if you think that's crazy, would it shock you to know that grass is green, the sky is blue?
Well, kind of.
Water is wet, and it takes over 5 million pints of blood to fill an Olympic swimming pool. How do I know that? Google. Why did I Google that? Don't ask. This era of shooters was overall my least favorite, so going back and playing any from this time is almost a gamble, because the chances of me liking it are less likely than a meteor hitting the earth. Hell, I didn't even enjoy Bulletstorm, which I'm told is supposed to be like the hidden gem of this generation of shooters. This brings me to Quake 4, a game that came out very early in this gen cycle, but is also a continuation of a long-running, old-school shooter franchise. I mean, fuck, I remember playing the original Quake as a kid. Not a lot, but at least enough to remember it. And oh my god, the amount of time I put into Quake 3 Arena, I mean, all I did was fight bots because I suck online. But still, I played the fuck out of that game. It's why I even paid attention to this game in the first place. And even now, I'm only interested because I have at least a fraction of an interest in Quake because of those experiences. Well, that, and when I played this game as a kid, there was a specifically gruesome scene that burned itself into my adolescent mind. A scene you probably know because it's probably the one thing this game is remembered most for. Anyways, the part about this being an old school game franchise, but also a product of the military woo-wah 7th generation era of shooters is the most important thing to know because it shows in almost every aspect of this game. Almost like it's caught in a limbo between its origins and the trends of its time. Let's get this story out of the way because it's really nothing special. I mean, it's very bland and generic and everything you'd expect from this time. The gist is, humans are in a war with an alien machine race known as the Strogg, and you go to their home world to stop them. Not much happens beyond that. You are just kind of jumping from level to level, doing things as part of the war effort until you eventually storm the Strogg base and blow it up. There's one moment where your character gets mutilated and turned into a Strogg, but really, that's just about it. That's really the only story beat that matters. And again, it's just it happens, and then that's it. It doesn't lead to anything greater. It just happens. This bland plot is made even worse by blander characters. I mean, there's Military Guy 1, Military Guy 2, Military Guy 3, Military Guy 4, and I'm just gonna let you guess what the 5th guy is. As for you, your character is Matthew Kane. His name is Matthew, and his last name is Kane. That's literally all there is to the character. Like, there's nothing else about him that I can tell you. There's literally not even enough about him for me to make a clever joke about him. Apparently he's a badass, because every single time you walk up to someone, they're all like, "Oh my god, aren't you Matthew Kane? I heard you were such a badass. You definitely look like a badass, ooh." This gets even funnier later in the game when you get turned into a strong and people talk to you all casually, but Kane's face looks like stretched pizza dough made of flesh. The art style is something I'm not really a big fan of either. It's also bland. Every area is some dark, industrious alien structure or a desert. And the older I get, the more I find this generation of graphics just aged horribly. Like, oh my god, I think a lot of games from this generation are just flat out fucking ugly. The only thing visually this game has going for it is its score, and it unnerves me a little bit, which I won't lie, not easy to do. But that's about it. That's like the only visually interesting thing this game has going for it. Which just leaves us with the gameplay, and this is where the game really gets stuck in this middle ground. The mission structure, especially at the very beginning, takes on the COD approach, where you're just moving from soldier to soldier, which you slowly follow as they lead you through the game. Of course, you get the obligatory turret and tank sections as if they were, marking off a checkbox. But then, you contrast that with having no weapon limit and a fixed health bar, which is something more reminiscent of old school shooters, not this era of shooter. On top of that, as the game goes on, the level design switches over to something much less scripted. Now, I say less scripted and not less linear because these levels aren't really open, but you are at least left to move about them at your own pace and figure out the way yourself. Sometimes I got lost just because the game doesn't do a good job at informing you where you have to go, but, I'd rather that than being handheld. There's light puzzle solving and navigating, but nothing that will rack your brain so long that you are just not paying attention anymore. Then the fact that you are fighting an alien race as opposed to humans means that you aren't just fighting the same enemy but with different guns. There's a decent variety here. Don't get me wrong, these enemies aren't reinventing the wheel or anything like that, but this is the type of enemy design you expect out of an old school shooter, not a 7th generation military shooter. Plus, the enemies serve their purpose well, which is all I can ask from a combat system like this. Gun variety is in the same boat, nothing you probably haven't seen before, but they all function well. For the most part, certain weapons felt like they could have been a bit better and had more punch to them, like the shotgun, but mainly the particle gun. This weapon should turn enemies into mush, if not automatically, at the very least upon headshot. But it doesn't work like that. You do get upgrades for your weapons throughout the game that increase their usefulness, but even with the damage increase to this weapon, it still feels lacking. I do like the dark matter gun, but that's me being a sucker for any gun that plays around with gravity or black holes or stuff like that. Something I found a little odd was how the pistol and machine gun are the only guns with flashlights attached to them. This is important, as the game has many dark areas where flashlights are needed. Maybe not to the extent of a game like Doom 3, but enough for it to matter. I thought the design was actually very interesting, and in some cases very fun. It makes you choose in certain scenarios between using a gun that gives you more visibility over power versus the opposite. Or develop other tactics like weapon switching in the middle of combat. For this, I enjoyed how the flashlight worked, but I do wish they had added it to the shotgun. Had they done that, it would have still left you with more powerful weapons that don't have flashlights to switch to, while giving you something other than the machine gun to use in dark corridors. Because honestly, the pistol is useless. It's one of those, you have infinite ammo for it, but it's because it's such a weak gun that that's the only way they can justify making it useful. And at that point, you might as well just make a useful pistol that has limited ammo or just not put the pistol in the game. I only have like a handful of complaints for this game. The first one being that the checkpoints slash autosaves are complete garbage. And I do mean garbage, because they are so inconsistent and spread out. And that's even if they're in the level. I swear, at times it feels like you can get halfway through a level, die, and then you get sent back to the beginning. They don't happen after every encounter or even after every few encounters. Hell, they don't even happen after completing multiple objectives. There's just no consistent way of predicting checkpoints in this game. Now on PC it's tolerable because you got quick saves, but console players will need to open the menu every time and manually save. And I remember this being the main reason I stopped playing this as a kid, because I was playing it on the 360 and I didn't feel like opening the menu after every single combat encounter just to save the game. But even on PC, I feel like quick saves are just kind of a band-aid solution. If your checkpoints are so bad where I gotta panic save after every little action out of fear that I will have to replay a whole section of the game, maybe you should have just made better checkpoints. Another complaint I have is that the bosses are just meh. That's it. They're just meh. I don't remember a thing about them. Not a single one of them. There are also like 2 difficulty spikes in this game that are, in my opinion, very cheap. The first one happens mid-game when you get turned into a Strogg and all your weapons that you've been building up are taken away. But it's not paired with enemy encounters that are appropriate for your now lacking arsenal. Instead, it opts to throw even more powerful enemies at you and more powerful encounters at you during a time when you do not have the means to defend yourself against them. To top this off, they get stingy with ammo, so you just find yourself barely scraping by for a while until you build your arsenal back up again. But hey, the trade-off is you get 25 more health and slightly faster walking speed, so it's totally worth getting mutilated, and not in the literal sense of what happens to your character, but I mean mutilated by the fucking gameplay. Now, for a while after that is when I would say this game is at its best, because that's when the game just gives you the freedom to move about these levels at your own pace, just getting immersed in the combat. But then you get to the end, and the game just starts throwing bullshit at you. Throwing you into beginner trap after beginner trap of high-powered enemies that ambush you in tight corners, and a final boss that is more frustrating than the game is worth. This boss fight gives you no hints on what to do, and the one hint I was supposed to get glitched out, and I only know this because I looked up the video of how to beat this boss because I got so frustrated at one point, I just wanted to know what the hell I was doing wrong. I would also say at this point is when the game just feels like it's going on a tad longer than it needs to. Because at this point, you've seen everything the game has to offer. There really isn't many or any memorable moments, just the pure combat, and you would have already gotten your fill by this point. Just about everything in this game is decent, but nothing more. That's the best way I can summarize Quake 4. It's better than COD campaigns, and is a decent enough time, but I imagine most people will play this once and never touch it again because it isn't very memorable or exciting beyond that. At no point was I giddy with joy or just sucked into the experience. But again, decent enough to pick it up if you can get it on sale. Play it for a weekend and then never touch it again, because honestly there are a million other games out there that are better. Plenty that are worse, but plenty that are better. Anyways, thank you for watching. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe if you like this video. You know, all the good stuff that helps a channel like this grow and thrive in the YouTube algorithm. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to check out the rest of my channel. I make reviews. I make short reviews like this. I make meme videos. I sometimes make tip videos for games I'm enjoying. I sometimes make rants. Anyways, I'm gonna go play in traffic now. I'll see you all later. Bye. Ashley. Many hate her, many more just tolerate her. And then there's me, here to defend her honor and smite those who speak ill will of her name with well-constructed argument.